So why didn't I review Oppenheimer right away the same weekend it came out? I don't know, I had other work ahead of that people were actually paying me for, whereas I don't have a weekly reliable film criticism paycheck right now and haven't since a few months into that whole plague thing that went down, remember that? The COVID pandemic isn't over. The COVID pandemic is still worse than you think it is. The COVID pandemic was always worse than you thought it was, and it's not going to go away, nor was it ever going to go away by wishing really hard that it would, pretending that it was never there in the first place, or through any means other than medical research that was always going to take longer than you or I likely wanted it to, because that's how science works. The reason you might think that any of this is not the case is because the world around us has been asked to go back to normal, and most of us have been varying degrees compliant. Not because what any of I just said is untrue, but because we exist under capitalism, mass media is very effective, and it worked on you. The fact is, there was a global plague, exacerbated by global institutional incompetence and uncaring that, in addition to killing and disabling millions of us, effectively froze entire sectors of global economic commerce, specifically in media and consumer goods, for about 2.5 years. And because the wealthy 1% of individuals and political institutions worldwide who lost out in that period financially decided that was quite long enough for their losses to continue, the rest of us have been all asked to not only go back to normal, but also to forget as quickly as possible that those 2.5 years of global plague ever happened in the first place, or at least that it wasn't really that bad, which is why most corporate entertainment media and entertainment media reporting that merely repeats talking points either without examination or with an agenda of its own never mentions it when talking about studio profits, corporate profits in general, box office, streaming numbers, TV ratings, company consolidation, audience tracking, wages, unions, spending, buying, all things directly related to and affected by the pandemic from the start and still affected in ongoing ways. Therefore, in the same way that you'd be very skeptical of any historical presentation about significant events of the mid-1940s that failed to mention, oh, and also World War II was happening, so that probably affected this in some respect, you should have that same skepticism and apply it to anyone talking about anything happening in business, politics, or culture that does not make, oh, also, that global viral plague probably contributed to this too, a central part of their thesis, because it is central to everything, whether we want it to be or not, for the foreseeable future. Thank you for listening, and stay safe. But, you know, if you've a line on that and an open job spot on those lines, by all means, please let me know. Until then, I get to things when I get to them. And I don't mind people asking, at least not half as much as when the follow-up to that is, but you covered Barbie, so aren't you also participating in Barbenheimer, as though that's some kind of official event we all decided was a real thing everyone had to get on board with because the internet said it was a thing? And no, I didn't in fact go to 2 movies that had fuck all to do with each other on the same day because some cutesy-poo meme from some fucking influencer on social media told me I was supposed to, and yes, I know that being a grouch about that puts me perilously close to being exactly the kind of contrarian about contrarianism digital persona I tend to rail against on here.
I used to be with it, but then they changed what it was. Now what I'm with isn't it, and what's it seems weird and scary to me. It'll happen to you.
But I don't care, because, yeah, I don't care. I was already gonna go see both of these regardless of when they came out opposite one another or not. I didn't need a meme to make that a thing, and I also realized that not only me being salty about this, but the existence of this period is one of those things that's gonna date the episode in like a month or longer by the time I get the fucking thing out. Which, by the way, is another thing that didn't used to be a problem that I hate sounding like an old man about, but holy fuck, if there's one thing I hate about the internet age more than everything else about the internet age, it's the flattening out of everybody's sense of timescale progression. As in, back in the before time, if and when you did come across something that anyone had said or just any piece of information from even a year ago in the past, you knew by virtue of it not just happening or being broadcast live the fuck in front of you that it was in fact from the past, and you shouldn't necessarily assume that any of it, any fact, any opinion, anything was still held to or considered in the present because that's how chronological time works. But in the interest of preventing that, here's what Barbenheimer was, if you're a person watching this in the future for some reason and have no idea what that setup was about.
Everybody gather round. We're gonna tell the story of the before time again.
So remember back when that global plague that's killing everybody was even plaguier and killing more everybody, so movies couldn't come out in theaters for a while? Well, during that period, Christopher Nolan had a backwards movie called Tenet coming out. It was fine, and he thought it should be in theaters anyway, despite all the people dying, what with the plague and everything, and the studio releasing it, Warner Brothers, agreed because Christopher Nolan is a very serious artist, which means we have to take what he says about film stocks and aspect ratios and apparently release schedules very, very seriously. But then a year or so later, when Warner Brothers adjusted their position position and instead decided all of their movies should be in theaters and also on streaming while the vaccination rollout kicked in and the reopening transition happened, Christopher Nolan became extremely cross about this, declared that they were now the worst studio ever, and actually took his next big movie, Oppenheimer, to Universal instead. Warner Brothers then appeared to retaliate by placing the release date of their guaranteed big summer blockbuster, Greta Gerwig's Barbie, on the same date as Oppenheimer, virtually guaranteeing that the 3-hour historical biopic would get trounced at the box office by the family-friendly comedy based on the popular doll brand, and this caused internet movie discussion spaces to lose their collective goddamn minds. See, for the collective hive mind of cinephile thinkers, sometimes referred to as film Twitter, this was basically the equivalent of getting a psychic vision of your parents' impending ugly divorce, or maybe just realizing that the couple you were friends with both partners in was about to break up and you were gonna have to go through the oh no, which friend team am I on exhausting bullshit of. Because everyone knew the obvious fact that Barbie was going to be a huge hit just for the sake of being Barbie, and it definitely was gonna outdraw a kinda depressing looking historical movie in theaters, no matter how many times you splatter from the director of The Dark Knight all over those Oppenheimer ads. It's just how things work. And any film buck worth their salt also knew those kind of box office results would generally get reported on in the press, especially the film journalism press, in the form of, no big surprise, a mass market toy movie beats an auteur serious movie, woe unto the culture, etc., etc.
Tell them you want stories about people, not $100 million of stunts and explosives. People, it's up to you. If the movie stinks, just don't go.
Except Barbie, apart from its plastic pedigree, was also an auteur project courtesy director Greta Gerwig, equally anticipating in its own right and fully expected to be something special, more than just a toy movie. So the thought of having the standard issue, corporate IP, mass audience brand movies bad, serious think piece movies good discourse swallow up their enthusiasm into a black hole of binary choice sounded pretty painful. Yeah, I mean, we've seen this happen before, it sucks. And then factor in the inevitable additional headache of YouTube brainworm goons infecting the discourse further by imposing a girl movie versus man movie, woke versus whatever culture war framing onto the whole thing. Nope. A whole bunch of very online folks just decided to finally nope out of one of these incoming blowouts preemptively and started aggressively talking up the idea that the collective we were just gonna make it a point to see both movies, and this became a meme on social media that went exactly viral enough, and thus Barbenheimer. And you know what? Fine. That aspect of it I get. It's positive. The internet collectivizing to do something positive, sort of, for a change. And I really appreciate the idea that it managed to catch on and stay caught on, mainly by just being under the radar enough that because everyone on TV is striking, there wasn't an SNL or Seth Meyers sketch to suck all the fun out of it. But it still got to the point of mimetic obligation and people pretending it was more organic than it was, and the studios kind of jumped on board with it. Oh, and speaking of which, because Warner Brothers is still run by fucking idiots who basically now have a hit movie by accident, didn't think about the international marketing, and ended up tweeting out Barbenheimer memes themselves, and did not consider that in Japan, perhaps joking about Robert Oppenheimer is not considered that funny, and then Warner Brothers Japan had to issue an apology about this, and now Japanese Twitter is full of retaliatory Barbie meets 9/11 memes, so great job capitalizing the public relations on the first good news your company has had in 5-6 years, I guess. Anyway, it did remind me in a more interesting sense that there really are people who don't remember anymore. They just don't know that this is how it always used to be. Before box office reporting became a rigged game about only ever being number one for point scoring and bragging rights by studios, so everybody got out of each other's way and only opened one big movie at a time, big movies opened against each other, and being in second or third place with a strong hold wasn't the end of the world. It was often a strategy. Did you know in 1982, often called one of the best, if not the best movie year ever by dudes my age for reasons that will soon be readily apparent, The Road Warrior, Poltergeist, Blade Runner, The Thing, and Tron were all released in the same summer, and not one of them opened in first place at the box office when they did? Now, The Thing legitimately bombed. It opened in 8th place the same week that Blade Runner opened at number 2. It was badly marketed, the studio dropped the ball. People figured out that was a classic later. But they both, like every other movie in the US, were getting blown out by the unprecedented juggernaut that was Steven Spielberg's E.T. That was also the case for Tron and Poltergeist, and Road Warrior actually came out before E.T., but while the first Conan was still the number 1 movie, so it only opened in 4th, believe it or not. And E.T. didn't lose that number 1 spot until somebody released a comedy musical about Dolly Parton running a house of ill repute.
Picture shows, kissing long and loving slow.
Yeah, somehow that turned a huge profit. That movie's actually really funny. You should check it out. Heck, did you know Gremlins and Ghostbusters came out on the same day in 1984? Yeah, Gremlins had to settle for second place, but both movies did great and are well remembered. Want a more recent one? Casino Royale, the first Daniel Craig James Bond movie, never cracked number one at the overall box office its opening weekend, even though it wound up the biggest Bond movie up to that point. Why? It was playing against Happy Feet. Never count out a kids movie. I could keep going, but I think you get my point. Most of those movies, very well remembered, profitable. The Thing is another story, but that's a whole other history. This was a better system, or if not a system, a better way of seeing things, because you didn't have quote-unquote mistakes like what's happening with Elemental, where your movie can open opposite The Flash and it doesn't hit number one like a Pixar release is supposed to. It gets called a bomb and suddenly it's a doom and gloom scenario, but then people check again and a few weeks later and oops, turns out The Flash, that number one movie, sank like a stone right after, and now it's a colossal failure for Warner Brothers, while Elemental stayed in the middle spot and did just fine for a few weeks on end, and now it's legging it out to probably make its money back, and it's a significant success. What do you know?
Fuck you, fuck you, fuck you. You're cool. And fuck you, I'm out.
Or how the new Indiana Jones, only doing so-so, proved it cost too much, and Disney totally screwed that one up, and every other thing wrong with whatever else you want to project onto it, until cinema-saving golden boy Tom Cruise's new Mission Impossible sequel did the same kind of so-so returns with the same inflated costs, and now it's just kinda, hey, whatever, nobody's perfect, right? Almost like there's more of an appetite in the YouTube movie opinion and social media fake news algorithms for Disney is finished content than there is for information, and the numbers self-select for, whatever creates opportunity to put a plunging stock graph plus angry Wojak plus sad Mickey thumbnail together and farm those clicks, but that's a bigger discussion we'll have another time. Because for now, I'm going to level with you. When I originally started writing this episode, it had a whole different ending, pointing to the inevitability that it wasn't going to be repeated for the next impending hyped-up female-led blockbuster versus super serious film Twitter sanctified blockbuster thing in the form of this The Marvels not getting IMAX screens because of Dune 2 thing, which really feels like someone trying to make a Warner Brothers versus Disney conflict out of not very much. I mean, they aren't coming out the same day. Was The Marvels even being promoted as an IMAX-specific thing at all? I don't think it was. And the studios are already trying to make Saw Patrol happen, that kind of nonsense.
And you ruined it.
Irreverent joke around, then pivot to how after all that sound and fury, the original point of what Barbenheimer was trying to accomplish both did and didn't happen. Because on one hand, yeah, both movies made money, that's good, because they're both good movies, so that's good for the art form and the talented people who made them and they deserve their success. Right on. But, on the other hand, a gross, backlashy, misogynist spew did end up happening around and against Barbie from all the usual suspects.
The media loves Barbie. They're going crazy over it. I haven't looked at Rotten Tomatoes today. Last I saw it was like a 90%. The real people are out there, and the real people are calling it out for what it is.
Blatant, man-hating activism, charged, deranged, subversive, intersectional pieces of insane, hyper-indulgent, third-wave feminist propaganda I have ever seen.
Spiteful, bitter, mean-spirited, borderline unhinged hatred of men and everything even vaguely associated with them. Barbie is like the deformed, mutated rage child of Captain Marvel, Ghostbusters 2016, and She-Hulk.
The director of the film is actually a really talented director. I think that she has a lot of potential with who she could be as a director, but unfortunately she's also a flaming feminist and she has to push that in everything that she does.
This is an assault on not just Ken, but all men.
I largely am with Bill Maher on this one.
Whoa!
Maher posted a 4-paragraph response to the film Wednesday on social media in which he wrote, "Okay, Barbie, I was hoping it wouldn't be preachy, man-hating, and a zombie lie. Alas, it was all three."
They're trying to kiss up to the Chinese Communist Party because they want to make money selling the movie in China.
Week one, this thing is going to clean up at the domestic box office. My prediction is going to just absolutely fall off a cliff after that. The repeat business on this movie is going to be non-existent.
So, did it succeed at thwarting anything, if only because Oppenheimer didn't end up becoming tarnished alternative in that stupid discourse? I suppose, maybe?
Is this a happy ending or a sad ending?
It's an ending. That's enough.
Like I said, this ran long and started to get away from me, and I've got more to say about that business than probably becomes another piece later as well. What I want to come back to for now is that whatever the point of the Barbenheimer meme was, it did get people hyping up at least one movie for something other than being number one, and I'd like to think it's not an accident that in the wake of that, media outlets that too often fall down on the job for these stories actually covered the Elemental bounce back, and then covered the similar performance for the new Ninja Turtles movie, where a third-place opening that a year or two ago might have been called disappointing is being noticed as actually steady hold that's already on track to hit 100 mil global, earning back its budget, and likely turning into the solid mid-budget hit Paramount and Nickelodeon needed it to be. This whole all or nothing, no room for middle, peak or trash, no chance to grow mentality is basically the box office version of all the ratings, residuals, streaming versus conventional distribution conflict that the Writers and Actors Guilds are striking against now, and you already know whose side I'm on there, the only correct one. So even if I started out annoyed by a meme to the point that I was still annoyed by it when I was writing the beginning of this script and now don't really have a coherent ending maybe, if it's what was needed to blow up this specific paradigm, okay, sure, I'm glad Barbenheimer was a thing. I'm not doing Saw Patrol though, that's fucking dumb. I'm Bob, and that's the big picture.